Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Now, biotech company Flagship Pioneering has raised $3.6 billion for ventures in health, sustainability, and AI. With $14 billion of assets under management, it ranks amongst the top biotech investors globally. Now, the firm has launched and invested in dozens of companies, including Moderna. Well, I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by Noubar Afeyan, the Flagship chief executive and founder, who's also, of course, co-founder of Moderna. Noubar, thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations on this big round of fundraising. As a mainstream biotech VC, how do you see AI actually impacting drug discovery, but also, development in healthcare in general, of which you want to be part of?
Well, Francine, first, thanks for having me this morning. It is indeed an important milestone because, in our type of business where we're creating new companies and helping them grow, kind of every ending is a beginning. So this is a beginning of a new wave of innovation and potential to impact healthcare and sustainability. And in fact, we are living at a time where, over the past 25 years the Flagship's operated, we've never seen a technology such as AI that is so suitable for kind of reducing the uncertainty involved in drug discovery and drug development. Here we're dealing with complex biological systems. Historically, we've not really understood the details and the mechanisms of what actually goes wrong in disease and how we can actually make some specific changes to be able to help heal or improve the state of a patient. And we're beginning to measure, handle the data, and create models that'll help guide us. And we're seeing acceleration in the time it takes to come up with early candidates as drugs, and then very much so helping us identify the patients to be able to target in trials. So this, everywhere you look, this technology has applications, and we think it's very early in its development.
So, Noubar, what do you think will be disrupted the most in this drug discovery? Is it, I guess, an assets of medicine that can benefit more quickly than others?
I think that if you look at what medicines generally do, they're intended to very precisely and safely alter the state of a particular cell or a particular target protein. And to do that, you need to be able to know enough about the system to be able to do that. And historically, we've relied heavily on lots of trial and error, lots of experimentation, very low probabilities of success. And this industry has succeeded despite those odds. Those odds are increasing steadily. If you look, for example, at Moderna, that technology, the mRNA technology that we developed now over a decade ago, now is being applied to over 50 different clinical programs. Why? Because we're able to programmably deliver a medicine for a particular purpose. Historically, we've not been able to do that in the pharmaceutical industry. We think that's going to spread beyond just one instance to many, many different approaches. And the benefit will be shorter times, higher predictability, reduction in cost of development, we expect, but also in the clinical development stage where you're actually testing this. If you have to test things in thousands of people, it's a very different activity than if you can identify those who are likely going to benefit so you can actually make a more precise medicine.
So, Noubar, you've raised $3.6 billion for these new ventures. Of course, what you do is bankroll some of the biotech startups, but you also generate in-house ideas and build them from the ground up. Do you know how you'll deploy those $3.6 billion?
Well, this is the second time in about 3 years that we've raised roughly a similar sum of money. Of course, the underlying technologies shift, but generally we, Francine, are creating about 25 companies in a span of 3 years through our labs. That's after roughly about 100 attempts that we do around different approaches to science. And these will be roughly 3/4 in the broad therapeutics arena and about 1/4 in sustainability. That includes agriculture, carbon capture, through regenerative agriculture, and areas that use life science in the planet's health, not just human health. Within human health, there's a number of diseases which are more and more lending themselves to more effective therapeutics. We've seen about vaccines. We're seeing in cancer some major breakthroughs, also neurodegenerative diseases. Obesity has opened up. If we were talking 3 years ago, it would not be a big area of focus. Now we and others have dozens of approaches going after that. So, we'll go where it looks like there are more clear opportunities to have impact. And of course, we keep in mind the cost effectiveness of the drugs that we can develop through the innovations, not just the fact that we can find small niche markets to be able to fulfill. So this is the dynamic that the biotechnology industry finds itself in, and we feel privileged to be able to have the resources, the human capital, scientific capital, and financial capital to be able to continue our work.
But so, Noubar, is this mainly also to develop individual drugs, or is it, to revolutionize a part of the industry like you did with the mRNA COVID vaccine at Moderna?
Well, that's an excellent question. So we create traditionally what we call platform companies. These all involve major advances that can lead to many drugs per company. To be able to advance those drugs, we forge partnerships with many, many large pharmaceutical companies. So our style of company creation is very much about platforms that lead to many products. We have the ability to develop products in-house ourselves, and increasingly at Flagship, we have a team called Pioneering Medicines doing that as well. So it'll be a balance between platforms that lead to products in our companies, but also selectively a few products that we'll develop as well. It'll be a mix.
And where are you deploying regionally that capital? How is the IRA actually impacting your investment decision in the U.S.?
Look, at this point, we look carefully at the IRA and how it manifests. It's, of course, going after more mature drugs in the first instance, but it does affect how we think about disease areas and approaches, small molecules versus large ones, that we need to be thoughtful of as we innovate. But in terms of geography, the essence of our operations are in Cambridge, Boston, Massachusetts. But over the last few years, we've begun to set up satellite operations, one in London, one in Singapore to serve the APAC region. And there, what we're trying to do is to create linkages between our ecosystem of roughly 48 distinct companies that have come out of our labs and those regional ecosystems, trying to forge alliances in science, in clinical trials, in partnerships with manufacturing, financial partnerships. So we're beginning to create linkages between our proprietary ecosystem of startups with a global presence in these key markets where biotechnology is also flourishing.
I mean, do you have something? Because I know you're very knowledgeable in some of the technologies that you're using, some of the medicine that could come up. Is there something that you think could be on the cusp of really being a breakthrough?
Look, there's two things that I'll just mention, but of course we have a lot. So anytime I mention two, all the rest kind of feel like they're not as important. And in fact, they are. But just very briefly to mention, there's two companies I'll mention. One called Generate Biomedicines that's truly cracked the ability to be able to computationally generate antibodies, monoclonal antibodies. These are the mainstay drugs over the last few decades of biotechnology. But we can computationally now generate them to go after any target very, very specifically and very quickly. That means that we have dozens and dozens of programs now accelerating. This is using generative AI. It's a 6-year-old effort, quite large, about a dozen programs advancing. So that's one breakthrough approach that will be a systemic change in the way proteins are developed. The other is a technology called gene writing that our company Tessera Therapeutics has pioneered. And here, instead of editing and making very tiny changes to a genome, we're able to insert the correct gene that can take care of any and all variants of a particular rare disease, or in cancer, have some very meaningful interventions. So we're looking at gene writing, we're looking at these things, and these are both platforms that are 4, 5, 6 years old, with hundreds of millions that have gone into establishing the science, and now really beginning to see the fruits.
Yeah. Noubar, what do you make of China and the Biosecures Act? Would you, for example, consider investing in Chinese biotechs?
Well, Francine, because our focus is so much on our own internal science, we're not investing per se in science that's generated elsewhere, but we're rather financing the companies that we create. But those companies in turn have historically had occasionally ties with Chinese companies, whether it was to do contract research, to do manufacturing, even in some cases we've explored commercial relationships. And those have been affected by the recent climate that's been created. And so we, like others, are carefully assessing where we might find headwinds when it comes to those types of partnerships and where we must continue to be involved, because health is a global challenge. It's not a regional challenge. And if our technologies can address health challenges in China, we need to find ways by which we can actually apply ourselves there. But we're doing so through partnerships, sometimes through regional partnerships. For example, in Singapore, we have some discussions which may in turn make us better partners to be present in China. These are the things that are more refinements, but we and others are looking at this and saying, okay, where's this going, and how can we continue to bring our science to bear on important problems there?
Noubar, thank you so much for joining us today. That was Noubar Afeyan, the co-founder of Moderna and, of course, chief executive of Flagship Pioneering after fundraising some $3.6 billion for new ventures.